right, ladies and gentlemen, how you guys doing? Welcome. How you living? You guys doing well? Good. I hope you're all doing well. Tonight, we got something special for you. Now, um, myself and my guest here, we've had some exchanges recently. And it's gonna be like the Thriller of Manila. It's gonna be like the Clash of the Titans. Let me bring up and welcome you guys, Marte. But we have a disagreement on the topic of, is polygyny a sin, right? And you said I'm wrong. I said you're wrong, and I'm expecting you to show me my error in my ways and be ready for the correction that you're not expecting to get. I think it's smarter and wiser to say that the things that are listed as a sin in the Bible are the things that I'm going to call out as a sin. I'm not going to expand, because there's two times in the Bible where it is written not to add anything to this text, because that would be a sin in itself.
I think it's a really good metric to use if we're looking at something in the Bible that's a sin. If he blatantly says this, no, don't do this, don't fucking do it.
We actually see God create structure for this thing rather than outlawing it or banning it. And he gives there's two references in the Bible that I will present to show you that instead of God saying, no, this is blasphemous, or no, this is wrong, this is a sin, he actually says, if you're going to do this thing, do it in this framework. So that, to me, if God is giving you a structure, then that can't be called a sin when he's giving you a framework on how to do it. Just like he gave us a framework on how to have sex within marriage, he said, in this confine, this is how you do this thing. When you see this other thing in polygyny, he says, this is how you do this thing if you're going to do this. Okay, he doesn't explicitly state it's a sin, and instead of outlawing it and forbidding it, he actually gives structure and guidance for it. We see in Genesis 16, 1-4, Abraham took Hagar as a second wife with Sarah's consent, and God did not rebuke him. Jacob in Genesis 29-30, and we see that he married Leah and then Rachel, and he's the one that fathered the 12 tribes of Israel. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So what he thought was a sin back then, he would still have to see as a sin today. It says, if he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, or marital rights. So this is Deuteronomy 21:15-17. This is after the part where, I think in Deuteronomy 17, where it says kings not to take too many horses and too many wives, right? And because I'm pretty sure that would probably be one of your scriptures that you would use to support that claim, but which is a good one, and it'll be a pretty piece. Deuteronomy 21:15-17. If a man has two wives, he loves one but not the other, and both bear him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the wife he does not love. When he wills his property to his sons, he must not give the rights of the firstborn to the son of the wife that he loves in preference to the actual firstborn. The son of the wife he does not love, he must acknowledge the son of his unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him the double share of all he has. That son is the first sign of his father's strength. The right of his firstborn belongs to him. This is God, through Moses, giving structure on how an individual who is in a polygynous relationship needs to address or handle his affairs when he's willing his assets. We see in Samuel that David had multiple wives and concubines. On top of that, we see the prophet Nathan comes to David, right? In 2 Samuel 12:8, God says to him, to Nathan, I gave you your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all of Israel and all of Judah. And if all that had been too little, I would have given you more. I don't understand how God would put David in a situation to where David would be living in habitual sin if it was a sin. David got corrected, not for polygyny, but he did get corrected for infidelity, or the adultery and the murder of Uriah. In the New Testament, Jesus doesn't condemn polygyny. He doesn't even mention it. None of the apostles mention it. Not even Peter or Paul, right? Ever explicitly bring up polygyny even when they have the opportunity to address it. So we also see in the New Testament, right, as I pull this up, 1 Timothy 3:2 and Titus 1:6. That's addressing a man of one wife, but that was for a position of elder, a role of authority in the church. That's not a layman. So when they're saying that the elder or the deacon has to be a husband of one wife, they cannot be drunk with wine, and they have to be able to teach or something like that. Those are requirements for an elder, not a layman. So I think understanding the context of that is important. Why would they have to say you need to be the husband of one wife if they all were husbands of one wife? They must be had husbands in the churches at the time that were husbands of multiple wives. So if a guy had multiple wives, you can see that he could be a Christian and be part of the church, but he cannot have a role in the church as an elder. So the quote, and everybody likes to use Matthew 19, that Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. Jesus says right there, a man that he leaves the father and mother and joined to his wife, and the two become one flesh. And if he divorces his wife for any other reasons other than sexual immorality, and he marries another, he's committing adultery. I'm like, yes, you're right. But what is the topic and context that he's actually talking about? He is talking about divorce. What we do know is that Jesus is saying any man that divorces his wife for anything other than sexual immorality, whether it's the guy in a polygynous relationship or a guy in a monogamous relationship, I think the standard would still be the same. You cannot divorce your wife for anything other than sexual immorality. And if you do marry another, then you are committing adultery. I think that standard would be the same for whether the guy has 3 wives or 1. So,
you know what? I'll even grant you that.
There's nowhere in Acts do we see the apostles address this, because we do know they had converts, the Gentiles that were also practicing polygyny at the time. In Acts 15, never addressed it. Polygyny is never mentioned. If it were sinful, this would be the perfect place to prohibit it, because they are, informing these Gentiles, what is expected of the church. There's no record in Acts or any of the epistles of men being disfellowshipped for having multiple wives. And even Jewish Christians continued practicing polygyny. Even during the second temple of Judaism allowed polygyny. Josephus and Aquinas 17.1.2 actually writes about this. Jewish converts didn't stop practicing this, polygyny overnight, and scripture never instructs them, to stop practicing polygyny either.
There could be a distinction between Judaism and Christian ethics.
Well, this is Jewish Christians, Jewish people that were converting to Christianity is what I'm referencing, because those were the people that were living there, right? And the Romans. The early church fathers were culturally biased, but not theologically clear on where they stance on polygyny. And I will reference Augustine in his writing on the good of marriage, chapter 15. He states that the plurality of wives was no crime when it was the custom, right? It is a crime now because it is no longer the custom. This provides the church's objection that it's not a moral issue that they have a problem with, but a customary issue. He further goes on to say that although it was divinely permitted at that time, it is no longer necessary. So he's saying that although that polygyny was practiced and it was not a sin when the patriarchs did it, but today it's not necessary for men to do it, because they did not do it out of lust. They did it out of necessity. Tertullian writes about it. He advocates for monogamy for idealistic and aesthetic reasons, but he actually never calls it a sin either. And then Clement of Alexandria and Origen and others leaned towards celibacy or monogamy, but they never launched a biblical case against polygyny in any of their writings either. The Greco-Roman influence kind of overlooked the Hebrew tradition at that time, right? Because Rome was what, Constantine was ruling. That's what Constantine is the one that, legalized Christianity. Christianity needed to kind of mirror or adopt some of the customs and the norms, right? Cultural customs. So it was an easy transition. And that's a lot of political historians say that about this process. So Roman society promoted monogamy as civilized and branding polygyny as barbaric. Christianity spread through Roman Empire. Church leaders absorbed Roman sexual ethics, meaning their position on polygyny and monogamy. Canon law reflected a Roman politics, not scripture. The Council of Tertullian, I believe it is, in 692 AD, Canon 48, forbids clergy of marrying multiple wives or taking a second wife. But it applies only to clergy. And even then, it doesn't even call polygyny a sin. 6th century, civil laws restricting polygamy began to be enforced on Christians. So now it was not until the 6th century do we see civil laws being enforced on Christians. But again, this is Roman legalism, not divine law, right? So we see the Roman law are enforcing civil, consequences on Christians who are practicing polygamy, right? Because they're now considered citizens. And here's the last point. In 1580, I think it is, or 65, we see even during the reformers, right? This is the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther even presents an argument or a letter to Philip of Hesse, it is, and it states that he cannot forbid a man to marry more than one wife, for it does not contradict the scriptures. So here's my reason for why it would be a sin today is that God put the authorities that we have above us. He put them in place, right? So therefore God said, obey the laws of the land, right? If the laws of the land are thou shalt not, or that you can't be polygynous or have two wives legally, then any man that tries to do that would be sinning because they're breaking the law and not obeying the laws of the land. That would be my argument to say that it would not be able to be practiced today currently.
That is one of the points that I have.
I do want to point that out, that currently I could concede that argument to you, but that could also be changed, is what I'm pointing out.
So, by the way, since you've already hit on one of my reputations that I have, like, let's say the government says, okay, in order to make things more equal, we need to have more polygyny in America. Do you think the church would come up and say, you know what, we're going to obey the law and support it because it's a sin to disobey the law?
I don't think they would necessarily like outright support it and like champion this thing, but I don't think that they would call it a sin, and I think they would accept it.
Do you think that ceremonies with two women and one man would happen overnight if the laws changed in churches?
I think they will probably done quietly, just like Luther did Prince Philip's. He did his secretly.
So I don't know if you can follow me on this, but go to Leviticus 18:18 if you can.
Absolutely.
So here's the thing, though. When we look at this, it's understood, right? While the verse specifically prohibits marrying a woman and her sister's rivals, but the first wife is still alive, the language could be used to interpret in the extension to a general prohibition of polygyny. So here's the thing, though, is like if we look at this, the verse is often misunderstood, understood to specifically forbid marrying a woman and her sister at the time. We could say this, right? But if we're talking about this, the interpretation is extremely important. When they talked about sister at the time, they weren't talking about blood sister. Some scholars can argue that the phrase of woman and her sister could be interpreted as one in addition to another. So implying a general prohibition of polygyny. Can you agree with me on one thing? Does it talk about sexual prohibition?
It says, do not take your wife's sister as another wife. Yes, it says, do not take your wife's sister. Yes.
Right. Do you think that this was common knowledge for them to say blood all the time? Do you think that this is a definitive example of just blood?
I am looking at this exactly what's in front of me, and it says sister. I am not going to assume that it means anything else, or I'm just going to play safe and be like, I'm looking at it for what it says and not trying to put my own opinion on it. So I'm just saying this is what it says.
Glenn, let's say a scripture says, do unto others as you would do unto your brother. Do you think they're talking about blood relatives in this sense that I just stated? Do not harm another as you would your brother. We could say that that's family. There's so many different linguistic places. Well, we're talking about interpretation here.
Again, context is important, right? Because we do know that when they were talking about that, they could be either brother, but we do know, generally speaking, they were talking about fellow believer, another brother in Christ.
Do you think that sister could be transposed the same way?
Not necessarily in this context, because this is Old Testament. There's not the formation of the church, and they were not referencing them as brother and sister, right? Then
marrying your sister, and that's the thing.
That is weird. Don't marry your sister.
I don't think they were talking about blood sister when they talked about this.
Here we go back in Leviticus 18, right? It says, I'm gonna start from verse 11, okay? The nakedness of your father's wife Your sister, you shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister. She is near of kin to your father. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, for she is near of kin to your mother. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother, that's gay, and approach him or and approach his wife. She is your aunt. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife. It is your For it's your brother's nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter, nor shall you take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover naked or their nakedness. And then it says, they are near of kin to her. It is impious. Nor shall you, then here's verse 18, nor shall you uh take a woman as a rival to her sister to uncover her nakedness while
Yes.
the other is living. So here we go. Nor shall you take a woman as a rival to her sister. That means the woman that you already married is the woman's sister. You don't take a woman as a rival to her sister. Why was every other distinction of the relationship very clear and specified? Do not take your uncle's wife, that's your aunt. Do not
Okay,
take your
Glenn.
brother's wife, that's your brother's nakedness. It's very detailed and explicitly stated the
Let's walk this
relationship,
walk. So,
but
Glenn,
there was still a
it
process.
says, "Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife." What if I did take my sister's? What if I did take my wife's sister as a rival wife? Would that be a polygynous relationship?
Yes, it would still be under
So
as a
this is
definition. Yes, that
polygamy
in
would not
that
be a polygynous.
context. But hold on, in that context, yes, it would be a sin because you are not doing it according to the structure that God gave you. Again, it all comes back to structure. Okay, it's like this. If you have sex, is that a sin?
Outside of the covenant of marriage. Yes.
Oh, so there's a structure. There's a framework on how you could actually practice this thing and enjoy this thing and it not be a sin. Holy crap.
Do you think that does polygyny have a structure?
Actually, it does give God gives us a structure. We see that already.
A few moments ago.
We actually see God create structure for this thing rather than outlawing it or banning it. And he gives there's two references in the Bible that I will present to show you that instead of God saying, no, this is blasphemous or no, this is wrong, this is sin, he actually says, if you're going to do this thing, do it in this framework. So that to me, if God is giving you a structure, then that can't be called a sin when he's giving you a framework on how to do it. Just like he gave us a framework on how to have sex within marriage, he said, in this confine, this is how you do this thing. When you see this other thing in polygyny, he says, this is how you do this thing if you're going to do this. Okay, he doesn't explicitly state it's a sin. And instead of, outlawing it and forbidding it, he actually gives structure and guidance for it. It says, if he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, or marital rights. So this is Deuteronomy 21:15 through 17. This is after the part where I think in Deuteronomy 17 where it says kings not to take too many horses and too many wives, right? And because I'm pretty sure that would probably be one of your scriptures that you would use. If a man has two wives, he loves one but not the other, and both bear him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the wife he does not love. When he wills his property to his sons, he must not give the rights of the firstborn to the son of the wife that he loves in preference to the actual firstborn. The son of the wife he does not love. He must acknowledge the son of his unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him the double share of all he has. That son is the first sign of his father's strength. The right of his firstborn belongs to him. This is God, through Moses, giving structure on how an individual who is in a polygynous relationship needs to address or handle his affairs when he's willing his assets. Yes, it says again in
I need to see a
hold
prescription
on.
for society.
I'm going to give you exactly how God said if one is going to practice polygyny, this is how they should do it. That would be a prescription to society. He's saying, hey, if you're going to do it this way. He could have condemned it. He could have said that would be blasphemous, that would be wrong, but he does not. He said if they're going to do it, they do it this way. So that right there is a structure and a guideline. If you do anything the wrong way, it could be a sin, right?
I mean, yeah, I'll grant you that.
So if something is a sin, it's never permissible. Okay, we know homosexuality will never be permissible because God clearly states it as an abomination and it's a sin.
Murder, unjust murder is a sin. We could say that, right?
Murder is a sin, but to kill is not a sin.
How can you create a polygynous relationship without creating sin to have to do this? Can you explain this to me?
Again, you go back to how God said that if a man was going to take a second wife, what structure was in place. That is, I'm always going to go back to that. If God gave a structure for something, God gave a structure for marriage. You know that, right?
You said if God gave a structure?
I said if God gave a structure for something, that would be the thing that I would go back to. So I'm not giving you my interpretation. I said if God gave this, as if I said if God gave a structure for marriage, did he not? It's time to play the game. What was he thinking at this moment? If you guess Glenn is kicking my ass, you won.
Here's my question, though. If we were to have polygyny now, what would be your duty that you would say that it solves in today, 2025?
I don't think there's any situation that we could point to today other than saying, well, if we were in a dire, crisis of the birth rate and we're saying, okay, by any means necessary, let's get the birth rate up. That would be the only conceivable thing I could see why we would actually need to practice it. But at the same time, I would say that you would still need to incentivize men to actually want to take on this extra responsibility or even the responsibility of one woman to begin with, right? I think we're probably going to get to that point at some point in time. And if we keep on going down the path that we're at, that we're going to be like, hey guys, we're going to give you a tax write-off if you knock up a woman and you take care of her because we need to have kids and, you'll get $100,000 write-off if you have, 6 kids or something. I can see they're going to have to incentivize men to do it because men don't want to take that risk these days because they don't see it of value or worth it anymore.
This is my whole point, Glenn. The whole reason why we're here today talking about whether or not something's a sin, the underlying thing that I want to say, we could even say this is the covert message that I want to bring along, is that if we have men fighting in the trenches doing this, whether or not you call it the manosphere, whatever, I represent Christ, so I don't know what I represent as absent Christ, because that's all I have underneath my belt as far as like what I want to promote. And this is masculinity. This is a patriarchal structure that we have. And if we don't promote this, everything's all lost. But the problem with this is we have men typing, testing certain things and saying, go read my Substack and do this. What's the comprehension level of America? It's below 8th grade level. It's like these people that are reading your Substack aren't the people that we're trying to reach. The people that we're trying to reach right now are the people that are going to watch these clips, see things, even if it's clipped out of content, put the full video to where they can get the explanation. Men like you and me and everybody, Rollo Tomasi, Andrew Wilson, people like that are by intent and nature trying to fight this good fight, and we're in the trenches. My call right now is for all men to be in the trenches and fight with us. I don't want to be the lone man fighting. You don't want to be the only one fighting by yourself. I want brothers to come out of behind their keyboard from texting other people, get in here and literally fight on video. If you have ideas, don't complain about this. If you have a problem, this is how you drive a woman away. Bring her a problem and not a solution. Because I'm telling you, that is the biggest problem for you. You're bastardizing your relationship and you're creating more of the singularity that you promote in society by not doing anything.
See, I'm glad you mentioned that because that has been my biggest problem with the current state of, whether you want to call it the manosphere or the red pill, is that they do really good at the descriptions of the problem. They're good at pointing out the problem. They say, feminism is the problem, female promiscuity is the problem. And I'm like, yes, I agree. But when they provide solutions, right, the prescriptions of it, none of them are to combat feminism or to suppress female promiscuity. Actually, everything that you've noticed that you can see that they do prescribe actually teaches men how to capitalize on feminism and how to capitalize on female promiscuity for their hedonistic, selfish, gain. So what I have a problem with the current state of the you know, the manosphere or whatever is that nobody's actually addressing the actual problem that they say that they acknowledge is the problem. They're actually finding workarounds how to capitalize individually on the problem. And to me, that's problematic in itself. I think to a degree that feminism needs, you know, an adversary like the red pill to stay relevant. And I think the red pill actually needs feminism and promiscuity to stay relevant. Because if, let's say, we combated female promiscuity and feminism back just like even 50%, all these content creators and all these, gurus would be out of a job. So
Yeah.
the incentive to actually providing real solutions is not really motivated by them. Because if they do give everybody solutions, well, then they'll be out of a job to a degree, right? And I have a problem with that. Again, like my main contention with this thing was to call something a sin that God doesn't call explicitly himself. And I caution people to do that. I caution people not to do that, I should say, because there is two warnings. Again, there's one in Deuteronomy, one in Revelations 22, I believe, where it says, do not add anything to this, because that would be a sin in itself. And or not to take anything away from this as well, because that would be a sin in itself. So I don't want to say that something is a sin that God doesn't say is a sin. I think that's just a safe rule of thumb to live by. That's just me.
That's a good metric. I'll tell you, this is the conclusion. If I took anything away from this conversation, Glenn, I don't think that you're a bad guy. I don't think you're I don't think you're Andrew Tate number 2, because I've heard that about you. But here's the thing that I take away from this. I don't think that we've quite reconciled whether or not sin or not. I think it's on the fence in regard to this. And I hate this. The reason why is because the church doesn't like you lukewarm. In the public society, they'll tell you, we hate fence sitters all the time. So because I'm here, that's why I have to go to my spiritual father and get the final analysis from him tomorrow. Because here's the thing. I'll admit to you, the reason why I didn't want to have this is because I'm not as competent as like your Luigi's, your Jay Dyers and people like that. I'm just I'm a pro bodybuilder that just happened to fall into this debate community and happens to be best friends with Andrew Wilson, people and a part of the Crucible. Like, this is the thing I look into. If I'm going to be as responsible as possible, I'll have a conversation, but I'm not going to be an authority and have a debate and just be like, look, this is the right truth and all this. But I will have a conversation and tell you, I don't know absolutely what the translation is. But what I get from you is not an absolute, which I feel like you're an honest person in this regard. I don't think that you're promoting polygyny. I don't think that you're offering this as a prescription. But as far as a sin, I'm more clear on your rhetoric as to say, well, it doesn't absolutely say it's a sin. Well, that's where I also counter you and say, well, it doesn't absolutely say it is.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.